Hello, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. This is Kevin Morrison. I'm the Cook County Commissioner representing the 15th District in the northwest suburbs of Cook County. I'm really excited for today's conversation. Thank you to all of those who are watching this live and even those of you who may watch this recording. Again, I just want to let you know, once we get to our discussion portion, please put any questions you might have into the comment section and we'll be happy to get to them. Today we're talking about fiscal year 2021's budget, and I'm really happy that today we have Cook County's budget director, Annette Guzman, joining us. It's going to be a fun conversation. So fiscal 2021's total budget for Cook County is $6.9 billion. Healthcare and public safety make up 69% of the total budget. One item to note is that due to a vote 4 years ago, taxpayers will now be saving roughly $1.1 million with the consolidation of the Recorder of Deeds office into the Cook County Clerk's office. Budget Director Guzman will go into more detail about the $400 million historic budget gaps Cook County has faced due to COVID-19. But I really want to commend President Preckwinkle and her entire team for all of their incredibly hard work in closing this gap without raising any new taxes and further investing in equity measures that I've been advocating for over the past 2 years. The fiscal year 2021 budget allows close to $100 million to be invested over the next 2 years into equity areas: restorative justice, violence prevention, public health, workforce training, which I'm really excited about, affordable transportation, and housing assistance. As the chairman of the Technology and Innovation Committee, I'm excited to see investments in digital equity as well, helping get rid of the digital divide that's still present in Cook County. I'm happy for the work that we're doing there. I'm proud to see $5 million dedicated to small business assistance in fiscal year 2021. Support for small businesses is something I've pushed for since I've been since I was elected, but that has become even greater in light of COVID-19. I've seen firsthand how hard this pandemic has been on our small businesses, and I'm glad to see so many programs and resources becoming available here in Cook County to assist during this hard of times. And another thing I want to note, I was really overjoyed to have been invited to be part of a commission that Tony Preckwinkle created. Me, along with 3 other commissioners, are discussing what has went well, what could be done better in terms of all of the assistance and resources we've made available as a county to our business community this last year, and find ways to do better in assisting our business community in 2021. Again, I just want to give a note to anyone watching this live. Thank you for joining us. Please put any questions you have in the comments and we'll be happy to get those addressed. But without further ado, I want to pass over the mic to our great budget director, Annette Guzman. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Absolutely. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you guys can see it. See? Yes, there we go. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Annette Guzman, and as Commissioner Morrison said, I am the budget director for the county. I have to say, this is my first year as the budget director, and boy, what a year it's been already. Before we get into the budget, I do just want to say a couple of things about me. I always think it's important to get to know who it is that you're talking to. I have been with the county for now 2 years, first as the budget director and previously as the chief administrative officer for the Cook County assessor. And prior to that was chief of staff for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability for the city of Chicago. But prior to that, my actual background education is as a lawyer. I was a finance attorney for Sidley Austin here in Chicago for many years. But at my core, I'm a proud Southerner. I come from Nashville, raised in Atlanta, went to undergrad at Emory University in Atlanta. But now I'm an extremely proud Chicagoan. I've been here for well over a decade, went to school here, went to law school at University of Chicago. So Chicago is my home. My family lives here. I met my husband here. My brother lives here. So this is now my home and I love it. And all of the things that you guys care about when it comes to how we use our financial resources, those are the same things I care about as a taxpayer here in Cook County. So without further ado, just talk a little bit about, before we get into the budget recommendation, what are budgets and why do we keep them, and what is the job that Commissioner Morrison and his fellow colleagues are going to be asked to do in the coming weeks as they think about and vote upon the FY21 budget. So what is a budget, right? You guys all have budgets, you have your personal budgets, and municipal budgets aren't that different. They just have a lot more inputs in them. But is it a policy document? Is it a spending plan? Is it a resource allocation process? Is it an economic generator? It's all of these things. It's all of these things wrapped up in one, as well as more. And for us as a government, there are within the state of Illinois, we make up one small part of it, and all of our budgets are generated through legislation. There's statutes and ordinances that are on the books that require that governments create budgets to basically let taxpayers know how are we spending your money and what is the resources that we're using to operate. So the city of Chicago's budget is governed through their municipal codes. Our budget is governed through our county code, and the state budget is governed through state statutes. And it's important to note that both the city and the state all have revenues that actually contribute to our budget. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So this is us. We're governed by the county's code. And we have to present a budget before the first quarter of the next fiscal year. So our budgets are usually passed by the end of November because our fiscal year starts on December 1st. So for us, the president of Cook County, Tony Preckwinkle, put together a policy roadmap, and she established it back in 2018. And it's really the foundation off of which we create all of our budgets and kind of our roadmap for how we think about what is our priorities and what our goals are. And so back in 2018, this policy roadmap was established, and it really goes to making sure that our financial resources go to support healthy communities, establishing open communities, safe and thriving communities, smart communities, sustainable communities, and vital communities. 2020 and 2021 have presented a really unique challenge for our government, as well as governments up and down, state and local and municipal entities. And that is the unique challenge of COVID-19. And it's really impacted how we think about our operations, how we provide services to those that we provide services to. And so in light of that, the president actually released a plan back towards the early part of the pandemic called the COVID-19 Response Plan, from rapid response to equitable recovery. And equitable recovery is going to be so important when we talk about the budget a little bit later on. But because of this plan, she leveraged the policy roadmap to say, how do we want to prioritize our goals and the resources that we have to really support the work of the county. And through that, 5 additional policy goals were created, and they are the basis, along with the roadmap, for how we develop this year's or next year's budget. And our resources are really going to provide support to Cook County where we can have the greatest impact. We want to prioritize our support to the most vulnerable populations with a racial equity lens. We want to make sure that we're always maintaining continuity of service. You guys rely on us to provide services, and we want to make sure that we're able to do that. We want to make sure that we're coordinating efforts with all of our municipalities and state, local, federal government to make sure that we can leverage these shared resources. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're focusing on suburban Cook County, because there's a lot of need there, but the resources are often limited. And so, as Commissioner Morrison said, we prepared a budget recommendation for this year, for next year, I should say, of $6.9 billion. And for those of you who follow budgets, you know that this is more than last year's budget. We actually had a budget of $6.2 billion last year. And so you're wondering, oh my God, in the midst of all this, you said that there's no money, there's nothing, there's all this, that's been happening. How is it that your budget is going up? So we'll talk a little bit about that later on, but the $6.9 billion is an increase largely due to increases on our health fund side, so the hospital. And that's largely because of increases in the insurance plan, county care, that the hospital runs. As more and more people have had to or more and more people have become eligible for our insurance plan because of the fact that, they don't have a lot of other options out there. Maybe they lost their job, maybe they're on furlough, so their employers aren't paying for their insurance. That makes them eligible for our insurance plan, which means our membership numbers have gone up. And so that means increased revenue on the side of the health fund. But overall, it's a $6.9 billion budget. As Commissioner Morrison said, 69% of that is dedicated towards our healthcare and our public safety portfolios. So there are many mandates that the county has. One of them is healthcare. So we run both a hospital, a public health department, and an insurance plan. In public safety, we have a huge public safety apparatus that not only involves the actual running of police and detention centers, but as a court system, one of the largest in the country, one of the largest prosecutorial arms in the country through the state's attorney's office. We have one of the largest public defense law firms run by a county government here in the county of Cook. So huge apparatus of public safety and healthcare. And you can see all of the other areas of our budget that make up the $6.9 billion here. So just looking budget at a glance, just really quickly, it's a lot of information that you can definitely, if you're really interested, you can definitely flip through our budget book. But what is this support? So as Commissioner Morrison said earlier, we had a $400 million gap that was forecasted back in June. And so this budget goes to filling that gap. And it goes to support on the personnel side just under 22,000 employees, and that's across the entire county, both public safety, public health, administration, property tax, all of that. We're going to support all of that. Our operating budget is about $5.4 billion, and the operating budget is essentially everything that goes to support our operations. It doesn't include our capital that we use to support a lot of the technology projects that Commissioner Morrison said earlier. It doesn't include our benefits and pensions and things like that, but it's just operations. So on the capital side, we have a huge budget. It's about $517 million that goes to support capital improvements, things like restoring buildings, building buildings, highways and things like that. We have about $152 million going to highway improvements. And then we have about $100 million that go to capital equipment projects like purchasing of computer equipment, the creation of computer infrastructures for all of our offices to have our data be able to talk to each other. And so you'll see here that a lot of the other things that are going to support are the 6 key policy areas for the budget. So just really quickly, where does our revenue come from? How do we actually pay for all of this? So the $6.9 billion, a lot of it comes from property taxes, and this is for collections that were made last year. So just over $800 million. But then a lot of it comes from non-property taxes, things like sales tax and fees and licenses that we collect. The largest chunk comes from healthcare revenue that we receive from the provision of services by our hospitals and clinics. We get some from grants, which is intergovernmental revenue that we get from state and federal government. And a lot of it comes from our capital and debt proceeds and other resources. So that's just kind of a snapshot of, where do we get money? And then where is it going? As I said earlier, healthcare and public safety make up about 69% of what we pay for. But in addition to that, you'll see that, again, just over 500 million goes into capital projects. We have a large chunk, about 460 million, that goes to the actual finance and administration, the work that we do to provide services to residents. Property taxation gets a chunk. We do a lot of development and investment already in economic development work that our Bureau of Economic Development does. We have to service our debt. We have to pay our benefits and pensions for our employees. And then we have overhead, so like our buildings, our utility costs, and things like that. So I know this is going to be a question. A lot of people are like, how did you not raise taxes? And so this shows you on the general fund side, which was a gap of about $222 million. This shows you how we got to a balanced budget on the general fund side. So in addition to the 222 million that we forecasted back in June, we actually decided very early on through the course of COVID-19 that we needed to make sure that our resources are also going back into the community to make to really address some of the inequity that we were seeing that was exacerbated by the pandemic. So we decided to include $40 million of new investments to really address some of that inequity. And those investments include things like housing and critical services, like rent payment, rental assistance, things like that, new access to justice initiatives, small business assistance, job training, as Commissioner Morrison talked about earlier. So $40 million in new equity investments. And then we did the work, right? We had to do the work. We had to slim down our budget. And that included making reductions in certain areas, such as, I think a lot of you probably heard by now, we eliminated a slew of vacancies, about 654 vacancies on our general fund side. These are positions that no one exists in right now. So we just eliminated those. We reduced our administrative overhead. We decided to defer our certain contractual services into future years, knowing that those are nice to have, but we don't need them next year. We always take a hard look at the budget, and we eliminated about $6.5 million of just waste. We reduced travel and training into next year, and then we also restructured some debt so that we could decrease the amount of debt that we would have to service next year. In addition to that, since the forecast that we made in June, we also got increased revenue, and we also got funding from certain areas like the federal government. So, we had increased and reforecasted revenues over what we projected in June. We had higher than anticipated sales tax than that from our original projection. And then we made some decisions about additional resources that we were going to include into next year's budget. The first is federal relief that we received from the government in the form of the CARES Act. About $50 million of that will go towards reducing our gap. And then finally, we made a decision to use some of our rainy day fund, what we call reserves. I'm sure that a lot of you have reserves as well in your personal budget. So this is one time that we decided to dip into our reserves and bring over about $77 million of that to finish out the gap, which gives us a balanced budget. So now, what are some of the key priorities? Commissioner Morrison has talked about some of them already, so I won't spend too much time, but we are using this budget to make some key investments. One is in public safety in the area of the creation of a new immigration unit within the public defender's office. The second is the expansion of restorative justice courts that are under the chief judge's office, and certain things within the property tax area, such as the continued development of an integrated property tax system, so that all of those property tax offices are talking and sharing data, so that the service that we are able to provide to property owners and residents of Cook County is just that much more seamless and easy. The treasurer continues the work that she does to make sure that property owners are getting automatic refunds from property taxes to which they're entitled to. And then finally, as Commissioner Morrison said earlier, we are the beneficiary of savings by the consolidation that you guys voted for back in about 4 years ago to consolidate 2 offices, the Recorder of Deeds into the County Clerk's office. In addition, a number of highway and technology investments that we continue to make. We are very committed to bridging that digital divide. And so not only are we out there looking for grants to help us do that, but we're also putting our own money towards it. And so in addition to a grant that we received from the state of Illinois under the Connect Illinois Broadband Initiative, we're also putting part of our funding $2.2 million of our own money will go towards projects that will start to bring broadband access to certain areas of Cook County. And then our Department of Transportation and Highways, which is just like this incredible department that is so are doing a lot of work in Invest and Cook, which provides money to municipalities who need that kind of seed money to start, thinking through and designing a lot of their projects to improve roadways and transportation options within their municipalities. And then this year into next year, we'll see the beginning of the Fair Transit Demonstration Partnership that our Department of Transportation is also leading up, where we are really working to reduce fares and improve rider services for certain areas of Cook County that need it. And then finally, on the healthcare side, some initiatives there as well. We received a contact tracing grant, and so we are in the midst of really building up our contact tracing capabilities within the county and providing services to municipalities when it comes to things like behavioral health, as well as communication out to communities about, COVID-19 and how to keep their communities safe. We're expanding areas of our actual healthcare services through our clinics and our hospitals in certain areas that are really key to addressing equity within, or equity disparities in healthcare within certain communities. Opening up a new dialysis center at Provident, opening up a lifestyle center and a colon cancer prevention center. So not just treatment, but prevention center. And then expanding our services at our outpatient clinics, and County Care is also, which is our insurance provider, is doing a lot of work for children with special needs. And so just really wanted to just take a few moments to talk about the item that Commissioner Morrison talked about earlier, which is, we made an investment to begin making investments in equity to address some of the disparities that we have seen for years, but also now we have seen extremely exacerbated through this pandemic. The county has always made investments, but we are now in the beginning phases of what we will be creating called an equity fund, which means that every single year, we will make equity investments in our communities throughout the county. Like I said, COVID-19 made this abundantly clear that we can't just, do this in an unorganized or unstrategic fashion. But every year, through the work of our separately elected, Madam President, and the commissioners, we'll be making equity investments directly in our budget and actually tracking it. So we've done this in the past. Since 2015, we've invested about $27 million in justice initiatives through our Justice Advisory Council. We continually make investments in the Cook County health system through the underwriting of charity care and the work that they do to provide those who don't have insurance, who still get health care at our facilities. And then this year alone, we leveraged about $82 million from the CARES Act funding to create a slew of new programs through our Economic Development Bureau, such as, that really focuses on housing insecurity, small business support, technical assistance to small business, and assistance to manufacturers. Just you think of it, they came up with it, and these programs are the programs that we'll be seeing going into the future as well. So in 2021 alone, we'll be making close to $100 million of investments over the next 2 years. So just to break that down a little bit more for you, justice initiatives, about $20 million that will focus on grants for anti-recidivism programs, restorative justice programs, violence prevention, reentry services for those that have housing insecurity, that are either on the electronic monitoring population, or just coming out of our detention center, and felony drug diversion programs, economic development, small business assistance, workforce training, and housing programs for those who need it, including legal assistance, foreclosure, and mediation, and so forth. And then in healthcare, $40 million investment in next year alone in the areas to support charity care, increase behavioral health in our south and west sides of Chicago, to support safety net providers, and to address health inequity in underserved communities. So, as I said, now comes the hard work that the commissioners have to do. And remember, I showed you this budget time. Sorry, things keep popping up on my screen. This budget timeline. So for any budget that any municipal government does, there's certain things that happen. You have a forecast, which basically says this is how much we think we're going to need. This is how much our revenues we model out to come in for the next year. The executive makes a recommendation. There are a bunch of hearings that happen. There might be some amendments to that recommendation, and then there's a vote. We follow the exact same timeline here in the county. We produced a preliminary forecast back in June, right before June 30th. We worked over the summer months with our departments to understand what their needs are and to forecast our revenues. And now we find ourselves in October, right? We put out our budget recommendation a week ago, I think now. My days are getting so mixed up. A week ago, and now comes the work, right? We have town hall meetings that are going to be next week for the public to really, let us hear what they think about our budget. Town hall meetings like this. And then the departments will come before the commissioners to say, this is why we're putting the budget forth that we did in collaboration with the president's office. And then the commissioners get a chance to really weigh in on the budget and provide amendments if possible, if they so like. And then they call for a vote on the budget, which happens late in November. And then, as I said earlier, our fiscal year begins December 1st. And so we have to have all of that done before our next fiscal year starts so that we can fund the activities for the coming year. So we are incredibly focused and committed to transparency when it comes to our budget. And so I just want to just really quickly highlight a couple of things. Our budget book, the recommendation is on the budget website. You can find it here if you go to this website. When we pass the budget, you'll also find that it'll be up there very quickly thereafter the vote. We also launched a new website that really, if for those data people out there who really love looking at things like this, you can go on our website and you can actually click in and you can drill down to see, what makes up all the intergovernmental revenue. You can go in and see exactly what that intergovernmental revenue is, what makes up all your grants, what makes up, all of your non-property taxes, right? You can go in and see every single line item. You can also do that on the expenditure side. How are you paying for it? Who gets it? And for those who really, really care, we actually have all the raw data up on our website too. So if you actually want to download the data and play with it, you can do that as well. And then finally, we make ourselves available to you, right? We have public hearings that are going to occur on October 29th, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. And that's for you to be able to speak directly to the commissioners and tell them what you think about the budget. And if you disagree, if you think we should be doing something else. You can also submit a question directly to the budget office. And we actually have questions that are coming into us now that we work with people to respond, and we send it directly to your email. We also post them on our website. And then finally, you can register to speak at one of these virtual public hearings that are going to occur on the 29th. You can either do it through writing in a comment, or you can actually register to speak during the public town hall. So that's all I got. that's my spiel. So with that, I'll turn it back to Commissioner Morrison.
That is amazing. No, I greatly appreciate you sharing all of that. And I hope those of you tuning in live right now got some useful information. Again, I think, just shouting out President Preckwinkle, our budget director, Annette Guzman, and so many of our incredible staff in helping fill that $400 million historic budget gap that we saw due to COVID-19. You really deserve a lot of accolades. I know we'd be getting a lot of negative comments right now if we were having to push for drastic increases in property tax next year. But thanks to the hard work that we've seen, and we do owe you a lot of credit. That is not the conversation we're having today. Again, I want to let all of our live viewers know if you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything you're interested in, please put them in the live comments. I think it's quite useful that we have the budget opportunities to look on our online website. Before I actually ran for office, I read through the whole last year's budget, and it is quite interesting to see, how money is allotted in county government, and it's great to be part of that process. And so let's see, we don't have any live questions coming in yet, but please, folks, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, throw them our way. But Annette, thank you again for helping fill that budget gap. The accolades cannot stop. You deserve a lot of credit. So just keeping on that topic, what are some of the factors that led to that historic budget gap?
Sure. So naturally, year over year, there's going to be some gap between revenue and expenditures, because when we do our forecast, it's kind of like departments tell us what you want, right? And they're going to tell you everything they want, and so their expenditures usually do outstrip our revenues. But that's the wish list, right? But the county does have declining revenues. We have some of our traditional sources of revenue are declining, in that cigarette tax, right? People don't smoke as much anymore, and there's others. But this year in particular, this is a pretty historic budget gap, and we're not unique. We're not alone. The city of Chicago just put out their budget this week. The state has put out their budget. We're not unique in having a budget gap as drastic as this year, and it's purely, and majority of it is caused because of COVID-19. When the pandemic hit and we are not able to engage with our economy in the way that we usually do, you go to the store, you go to concerts, you go to the sports events, you travel, right? Those things aren't happening, and they definitely stopped once certain stay-at-home orders were put in place, and after the state put out its Restore Illinois plan, which actually puts factors on the economic activity that can occur based on what phase of the recovery we're in. And that's all correlated to the incidences of cases, COVID cases within any region of the state. So we're, I think, in region 10. I think that's the region we're in. And it's very specific as to what can happen during each phase. And that's actually helped us model out our revenue sources, because if we know that, we can only have events at 50 people can be an event, we know what kind of activity can happen from that. That's not a sports event. That's not a concert. None of that's going to happen. Certain parts of the Restore Illinois plan actually say that restaurants can only can have capacity of a certain amount, depending upon what phase of the economy or of the plan we're in. So we can actually model out much better now what can happen to revenue based on what phase of the recovery plan we're in. So the historic gap it's based almost entirely on the extreme contraction in the economic activity that's occurred in our economy since March. And it's had a drastic impact on the county. The county has about 65% of its revenue sources that are sensitive to the economy. So when the economy goes down, 65% of our revenues are going to go down. And some of them are going to go down even more, right? So that's what's causing the historic gap. Our revenue is just coming in so much less. We've already lost a large chunk of revenue this year because of it.
It's crazy times, but at this moment, I'm just glad that we are trying to do whatever we can to keep people safe and healthy. I know it's difficult. A lot of us would want to go to the movie theater, but some of the things, let's just say I really look forward to when things are safe to go back to some semblance of normalcy, and I hope it's sooner than later. But
right.
One thing I'm curious about, how were we able to address this budget gap without raising new taxes, which hopefully a lot of people out there are excited about?
Yeah, so, it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of collaboration with all of our elected officials in Cook County to really understand, what is it that you need? What is it that you have to be able to do next year? If we know that a vaccine is likely to come within the end of 2021 into 2022, then we know that, this is a temporary state. So what is it that you need to operate next year? And what can you do without? And so there was a lot of work to really whittle down what our expenditures were going to be into next year, and be realistic about it. We did get some help. The federal government did provide funding through the CARES Act, which we have in our possession to use until the end of this year, right? It's just lucky, I guess, it's like the luck of the draw that our fiscal year ends in November. So, part of our next year's budget, we're able to capture some of that funding to cover COVID-19 costs that we're going to incur, that we already know that we're going to incur. And then finally, we made the hard decision to, instead of raise taxes and put that burden on our residents and property owners, to bear the brunt of our operations at a time when they're just financially, that's difficult for so many people. We made the decision. We're going to use our reserves. We're going to use our rainy day fund. That's what they're actually there for, right? So why not use it so that we don't have to put that burden on those who can probably not bear it.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you going into more detail with that. Another question that I would like to pose, and I know that one part of that answer is, pesky commissioners like Kevin Morrison pushing for better resources and being made available for our small business community throughout the county. But could you talk a little bit more of what those conversations are like in terms of determining where to allocate new funding streams and what initiatives to focus on?
Sure. I think some of it is, we're lucky for the leadership we've had in the county for several years now, who focused on equity, inequity, and addressing inequity. And so we've been investing in it. And so we knew through partnerships and advocacy partnerships throughout the county where some of those areas already were going to be, because we'd already been addressing it. When the federal funding came and COVID-19 happened, we saw kind of almost immediately, where the inequity lied. Because when you have a contraction of resources and you have a contraction of help, the people who need it the most kind of bubble up to the surface, right? And with the health disparities that have been highlighted in this pandemic, the unequal access to capital that a lot of minority-owned businesses have, despite the fact that there's supposed to be a federal program that's open to those who need it the most. And the fact that, in the midst of all of this, that we not only a pandemic, we also have a lot of racial unrest, right? And so we're seeing the impact of inequity and how, the most neglected neighborhoods are the ones who are feeling the brunt of this pandemic the most. And so, we've been working all year to put programs in place, but I think that stands on the shoulders of a lot of the work that's been done in previous years. So I think it was, foresight, on the part of a lot of the leadership in the county. It's conversations that we've had with leadership. It's conversations that, frankly, the community has been kind of telling us, right? They've been advocating for it. And I just think that it's fortunate that we have leadership that listens and really, says, you know what? At the end of the day, we know what we need to function, and we have more. And so that more is going to go to those who need it in the community the most.
No, I appreciate that answer. And I'm glad that you mentioned the racial justice movement and the recent movements for criminal justice reform. Have any of those movements and the peaceful actions and the recent developments that we've seen over the last several months, did that have any impact on any of the decisions leading into the 2021 budget?
I mean, sure, absolutely. A lot of there's $20 million just alone this year in this year's budget that's going to go to criminal justice initiatives. I think that is a down payment that the county is making. I know that there's been a lot of desire and talk about certain budgets within the county, and if the funding going to those budgets is appropriate, and should we be looking at ways to engage with communities more to provide services that are needed in the criminal justice space. And those conversations are gonna happen, and they're gonna take some time, right? Thinking about shifting resources within municipal budgets it's a tricky thing, right? It's very tricky. And I think you have to do it intentionally. And I think you have to do it understanding all the impacts that or the ramifications that will come from making those types of decisions. So I think that the county made the decision. They're like, okay, yes, this is a long-term discussion. It didn't get over like this overnight. It's going to take us time to figure out how to unwind or redress some of the impacts of prior budgets. And so in the meantime, while we're having that conversation, we are going to make an investment in certain areas of social equity and criminal justice initiatives, as we continue to have conversations with the residents of Cook County and property owners of Cook County to understand how we should be using our resources. And so I think that, it's important for leaders to listen to the communities around them and to involve those communities in the process. And it can't happen overnight, because there's a reason why I showed you the timeline for the budget. Our budget timeline starts like back in May, right? And so in order to have the community really involved in that process, it's important that, we begin now in those conversations, so that next year we make another step. And the year after that, we make another step, right?
It's important. And, we're lucky that we, try to be as transparent as possible. We try to open up opportunities for communities to interact and share what their wants, needs, wish list is with the county, and how we could hopefully address that. And, one thing I'm curious about too is, and I prior to asking this question, for those of you watching live, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything you would like more information about as it comes and includes the fiscal 2021 budget, please put those questions in the live comments. But one thing I'm curious is, as the county's budget director, how do those conversations go with ensuring, the success of different departments, especially when you have to balance that with the interests of all the departments that the county has? Could you walk us through a little bit of that?
Absolutely. So, we have teams that work with each of the offices here in the county to understand what their needs are. But we also look at, what they've actually used resources for in the past, right? We look at, what is your usage rate of your budgets in prior years, to understand kind of from a trend analysis perspective, if there's areas of efficiency, if there's areas of waste, and if there are areas of, where we can use technology to automate and innovate to provide for better service, but also, more efficient service for residents. We also look for ways to do, where we can, use resources across county departments and offices. And so those conversations actually happen all throughout the year. It's not just doesn't happen at budget time, because if you just wait till budget time, it's very difficult to make that happen within a month or 2 month time frame. So those conversations are happening, and some of those discussions are multi-year. But essentially, the most basic thing that we do is just do a trend analysis to understand usage rate of budgets year over year, and we take a long-term views, like 5 years, 3 years to 5 years, looking at department budgets. And we look also at things that were one-time costs, things that are multi-year costs, to understand what they'll need for the coming year. And then you have the conversation of, I know that's that thing you want to do next year. How far along are you in your planning for that? Because if you're not too far along, then, what's the likelihood that it's going to happen next year? And we also have conversation of, okay, how much does it take to get that program or that initiative done? How many, is that technology? Is that people? Is that, outsourcing to a vendor? We try to have those conversations to understand what is the most efficient way to get initiatives and projects done within departments. So it's actually a very hands-on process. It's very back and forth process. It's not as if like we get a budget, we're like, oh, okay, and then we put it into the budget. It's really understanding operations, right? It's really understanding what it is that people need to be successful in their mandate that they were elected to do. And so it's like a conversation.
No, it is a lot of important conversations that are being made to try to figure out ways to better serve our residents. I agree with you. Some of the most impactful shifts in policy, they take a lot of planning and a lot of time to be able to ensure that we do it right the first time. I would say a lot of the policy changes that my office has worked on. We look to see what has been going well in other counties. What have any other governments done something similar? What issues did they have in implementing it that we could tweak to ensure it goes better when we implement something similar? And so lots of fun conversations to be had. I know we're talking about all things budget today. Annette, is there anything that wasn't discussed that you would really like to highlight before we conclude?
No, I think you're so thorough. It's like you're just ready. You're ready for the budget phase of the year. No, I think, I feel like we've been talking about the budget for the last week and a half since the president released her recommendation. As I said before, we try to be as transparent as we can about how we're using taxpayer funding. And I think that that's really important for your audience to understand, is that, we're not trying to hide anything. We have so many tools and so many things online for you to really dig down and understand what makes up our budget. Budgets are complicated. Budgets are hard. Budgets are, imperfect, but they strive to put first the goals and things that we're trying to achieve for the betterment of our county. And so I encourage all of you to dig into the budget book. I did, when I first came on back in January to this job, I literally read the entire budget book, literally from beginning to end. And I've never read a budget book that was so actually descriptive and explained so much about what the county does. And I think that that's a testament to how transparent we're trying to be in what we're using the funding for. And so I encourage all of you, you don't have to read the budget book from cover to cover. It's very big, but I do encourage you to try to, get, familiar with the budget, because it is, your money that is going to the work that we do. And so, read the budget book, really, really, really go on the interactive budget website, because it's actually pretty fun to just click down and oh, that's what that is. And it really tells you a lot about the county's resources and how we use them. So I encourage you to do that. And with that, that's my advice.
I'm happy you said that, and it's so true. And the second budget book I read was during last year's budget cycle. But when I was considering a run for commissioner, I wanted to ensure that I was up to date with all the different responsibilities that are included in county government. And you're right. When you read through the budget book, you really see just all the things that the county has a stake in, all the different programs, all the different various positions, from the state's attorney's office to the sheriff to the president's office. And so I want to thank you so much, Director Annette Guzman, for joining us today. For those of you who are watching, I just want to let you know we are creating ways for the public to interact and be part of the process that is going into the 2021 budget. We will be sharing information on my Facebook and social media and the like, ensuring that you have access to that online budget book, but also know about all the town halls and public hearings that will be occurring along the process. We'll be keeping you up to date as things change. But Annette, thank you so very much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for tuning in, and join us on the 29th. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.